opportunity for public comment. Members of the public wishing to address the board are welcome to do so during the board's regularly scheduled meeting. Well, this evening we have a discussion on our homeless policy that we're developing.
Yes.
Good evening.
Good evening, commissioners. So you guys established the desire for a homelessness fund, and so we're working on developing a policy so that way we know how to distribute the funds in the monies in that fund, as well as how we're going to fund the fund itself. So staff is just coming before you so that we can start the discussion and get some direction as to what the board would like us to do. I've presented in front of you guys just these slides as well. In addition, County Council drafted a resolution and order that kind of outlines some of these things to kind of give you food for thought and provide us with direction. So the first question that we have is funding the fund. How will it be funded? A couple of different things that we discussed. And Suzanne Johnson was nice enough to provide me with 5 years tax foreclosures, and I left it on my desk. One of the questions is the county's portion of foreclosed lands, the sales that we get from that. That is one possibility as to how this fund could be funded. She provided me with a 5-year look back on the average amount that we've collected, and it has ranged to as little as none 1 year to as much as, I believe, around 50,000 another year, 65,000 last year. And so that the portion of the funds that the county gets to keep from tax foreclosed lands is just our portion. We still turn over the rest to all the other taxing districts that might be eligible for some of those funds. So that's one possibility. Another possibility is a construction excise tax. This tax would only be for construction that happens in the unincorporated areas. Some of the cities already have a construction excise tax that they have within their city limits, and have found some success with that as well. But again, this would only be for the unincorporated areas that we could implement this. And then another funding option would be from the general fund. So the next question that we would have is eligibility. What type of housing projects would be eligible to apply for the funding? Would it be permanent supportive housing, transitional housing, or homeless shelters? And so the differences can be, permanent supportive housing, that is affordable housing assistance with voluntary support services to address the needs of chronically homeless people, services being designed to build independent living and tenacity. Thank you. Skills and connect people with community-based healthcare, treatment, and employment services. Transitional housing, which is generally limited for a time period, and stays can be anywhere from 2 weeks to 24 months, and provides people with help after a crisis such as a homelessness situation or a domestic violence situation. And then homeless shelters, which provide temporary residence for homeless individuals and families. And then the next and final step that we would want direction on is the process for applying, the application review, and the evaluation criteria. So would there be a formal application that everybody would use, or would it just be a narrative that's provided by the organization? Who would review the applications? A committee, and who would that committee consist of? And what would the evaluation criteria be? And so some of that is addressed in the policy that County Council put together in regards to the funds. The funding portion is the first 3, and then steps 4 and 5 and 6 are kind of what the, and 7, I'm sorry, would be determining who would be eligible, and then steps 8 would be the committee of whom, and then step 9 is kind of that evaluation criteria. Do you have any questions for me at this point in time?
I just have some so I get my. We originally started this when we basically had some money that we considered originally we were going to fund this through tax foreclosed land, right?
Yes.
That's how we kind of started this.
That's kind of what started the conversation. There was a piece of property that we thought could potentially be kind of like the funding mechanism for this, but it depends on what that piece of property sold for, and then the county's portion that we would be keeping, how much that would be. And so if you sold the property, and Suzanne Johnson could speak better to this because she knows the tax foreclosure piece of it better than I do, but as to if you sold the property for $200,000, the county is not keeping all of that $200,000. First, you have to pay back the expenses, and then the funds get distributed amongst all the taxing districts.
Yeah, and so you didn't have the breakdown, you left it on your desk, but maybe just roughly, did you say it's anywhere on yearly, 0 to 65 grand?
So over the 5 years.
Can you come up and get on the record, please? Thank you.
Suzanne Johnson, Assessment and Taxation Director. Over the 5 years, it was, it ranged from 0 to 65,000, the largest being just this last year. But the total for the 5 years was $97,000. So,
20,000 a year average,
yes.
not a lot, not a lot.
And the distribution of tax foreclosed property is statutory. We have to do it the way the statute requires.
So county council, and I can pass this out to you as well, she also provided an ORS. And this is similar to what we did with the property that was down in Alderbrook, where we recategorized it because there's a categorization where it can be given to a nonprofit agency if it meets certain criteria, if that agency meets certain criteria. And so this is another option that the board could make a change to the public lands policy to give priority for disposal of tax foreclosed land to nonprofits providing homeless housing. But it kind of, sometimes the properties that we get aren't necessarily feasible for those sorts of projects.
Right.
So it could be a combination where there could be some properties that could be used and renovated, not by us, but by an outside agency. And we could also be taking in some money, not a lot, through tax foreclosed properties, and if we so choose to have an excise tax. And then the money could be granted through application process to agencies such as Helping Hands.
That would be kind of, again, what you would want to establish in the policy. What would the criteria be? Helping Hands would be more of the transitional housing option, where, or you could do something along the lines of a permanent supportive housing, which would be involving more likely developers who would be coming in and building something that is like a permanent supportive housing. Or similar to, well, no, that would be transitional housing. What we did with the Agate Street home is also transitional.
And homeless shelters, we all got an email about homelessness. So there's a broad need. Regarding the excise tax on construction, I heard what I thought was a compelling argument in Cannon Beach. A builder said, well, we help create the solution. You shouldn't penalize us. You should tax the people who are creating the problem, which I thought was a compelling argument.
There are,
Who are those people?
People creating
The homeless people?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole, no, not the homeless people. That's blaming the victim. No, I'm not, that isn't what they meant. They said, rather than taxing the construction industry, which creates the solution to housing, we should be looking at taxing the industries that create the problem, and in their mind, that was aspects of the tourism industry, especially Airbnb and others who don't register completely. So it's a gnarlier problem than we might first contemplate.
Yeah.
So I think this is, if I could just go on for a minute, I think this is a good initial framing. I think the solution of this is something that I think you're pointing to, that we need to have a broader, longer-term consideration of the causes and the remedies of the problem, as well as not just how we generate the income, but the process by which we disseminate it, because it's a very complex issue, and there are a lot of vectors in play here, a lot of different industries involved, a lot of different needs and areas. It's good initial information, but it's a longer-term discussion. I think we'd be well served to have more community input and discussion on this before the board acts to declare a policy. That'd be my consideration and my point of view on this.
I think our house, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I believe it got repealed by the voters, but Tillamook County, did implement a construction excise tax. And so you could do things. They have in theirs, as far as exemptions, no tax imposed under this ordinance shall be imposed upon the following improvements. And so they have, number one is residential housing units guaranteed to be affordable under guidelines established by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development to households that earn no more than 80% of the median household income for a period of 30 years following the date of issuance of the certificate of occupancy. And then there's other things like residential additions or remodels that are less than $100,000 in value, private school improvements, public or private hospital improvements. So there are some exemptions, one including...
I'm familiar with that, and it's my conversations with Commissioner Bartline in Tillamook County that inform me to have the opinion that say that we go forward and have broader community discussion, because the commissioners imposed that tax in Tillamook County, and there was a particularly nasty, vitriolic campaign not only to repeal it, but to unseat some of the sitting county commissioners. So it's extremely volatile in terms of the community response to it. I think we'd be well considered to have a longer-term discussion where we heard people's points of view and concerns about this before we move forward to establish a policy that has really tremendous impact.
And that's what we're hoping to start this evening.
Good job.
Are there any other sources of revenue? What if, I'm just fantasizing.
Brainstorming session.
So what if, okay, so 20,000 on average a year that comes in. I don't know how much it would, if we were to do transitional housing, which is more like Helping Hands, which is kind of what I'm thinking of, because I don't know of other models that are as successful as that model right now. Maybe there are others, but I don't know of them. I wonder how long it would take to build up enough funds at 20,000 a year to expand a facility or to have another facility. It seems that if money is granted to these outside agencies for specific use, such as housing the homeless, then they can apply for grants and probably receive them, since it's coming from a government agency or entity. So I think that the 20,000 could be leveraged quite a bit, even if we only just start with that.
Right.
And then investigate further possible revenue sources. I can't think of any right now if we don't do like an excise tax. Your point is well taken. Maybe we can come up with another.
Well, it's a start, like you said, 20, it's just, it is a good start. And I agree with Commissioner Thompson that I too have had those conversations with Mr. Bartlin about the excise tax down in, it did not go well down there. And so that that'd be kind of I think that would duplicate itself up because the construction trade folks are very organized. I don't really agree with the analysis that they're creating the housing, I think, and not creating the problem. But that's another conversation, yeah. But I think that,
don't
I
agree with
agree
that.
also with Commissioner Thompson. I think that there could be a wider conversation here, and we shouldn't rush to get something going, since we're not talking about a lot of money coming in. And we could probably continue this conversation into the new board. Heather?
Just a question. One thing that Monica mentioned and that Commissioner Nebeker followed up on, the board could, if it wished, change its current property policies, which are directions to staff that the board has approved before, that says, that the board would like property that could possibly be used for a nonprofit to develop housing on a tax foreclosed piece of property, that would be categorized for possible a nonprofit and brought to the board as a priority, as opposed to the current categorization. The current favorable categorization is sale, of course, to get the revenue. But
And we have one of those tonight on our agenda,
yes,
as a matter of
but
fact.
if the board wanted to have staff work on changing the property rules, which are the directions to staff, that is something you could go forward with and be done fairly quickly if that was something that was of interest to the board to move forward on that one.
So could I ask then? That piece of property, because I see Serpa's in the background too, that piece of property we have on the agenda tonight, we have a $12,000, and I'll announce I know the person who's bidding on it, but I don't have any actual or potential conflict of interest because there's no money involved. He just hunts moles and cuts grass for me. So they bid $12,000 on a property that's worth $60,000. What if we said to staff, pen that sale and hold, just as we inventory excess capital from timber sales, we hold excess land and look at, could we have greater value from it? And we could do that now, yes?
Well, do you want me to go ahead? So part of our ordinance currently for property management includes several different types of categories. So I'm supposing that you would put it into some category for hold for another use. I think there's one that's kind of like that, so we probably could do that. The second point is we only turn this money over annually anyway, so we might have several different sales during the year that add up, during the time. The other thing I wrote a little note to Monica was about, I don't think that we should discount the possibility of having the other taxing districts in some way partnership with us. So,
What would that look like? Yeah.
like the cities or, I don't know, any other taxing district that receives these funds, maybe they would be interested in contributing to this fund.
It would be a good conversation to have with the cities because they're also trying to address the homelessness issue. And in these instances, these properties, a portion of the taxes get turned over to the cities.
I think that's an excellent idea.
Buildable lands. It's a lovely phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And we do have a piece of land. Is that piece of land buildable? Do we know? That one
The one tonight?
the one tonight?
It's
It's got some issues.
Yeah.
It has it's wet area, it's at the bottom of the hill, and it has a little stream or brook through it, and it doesn't currently have access to it. The street hasn't been developed, so it's got a lot of issues that I think because they live across the street, they're looking at as an adjoining piece of property to theirs.
And frankly, that's what we normally get are those types of properties that would only be valuable to an adjoining owner. This last couple of years, we've just had this, we've had structures and, things that are unusual.
But it may be in a time of increased housing need that the criteria for what's buildable land shifts to include what didn't used to be considered buildable that would be buildable now, or odd lots or scrub lots or whatever the term is for them. I mean, but it makes sense because, as my sister says, they're not building any more land, right? So if we hang on to the land and look at it with our partners and take time to engage in a broader community conversation, both with neighbors and with affected entities, I mean, I think caution and prudence and longer conversation are just called for, but I like how we're having the information early. I really appreciate staff's expertise in this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, there's opportunity here to kind of figure this out, and I think it goes a little deeper than where we are now. But I think that we pretty much agree on that, we can start with that. It seems like the easiest to start is with the foreclosure amounts and the $20,000. At least that starts something for us. And I think that, I think that is a direction I think we should pursue. And I think we should also, as you have pointed out, to kind of try to open up the question a little more and do a little more research on, how we can bring these better analysis on the properties,
Given shifting circumstances,
Yeah.
to take a fresh look with whoever has eyes and skills to see it.
Serpa, you would know that quite well. You would know, back in 2009 and 10, we had a lot of foreclosures go down, didn't we? But we didn't have a lot of people buying those properties.
Nobody had money.
Where some of them were wetlands where you could not.
Right.
There were a lot of small slivers that size-wise or shape-wise could not.
Right. I know you worked real hard over the last few years at kind of whittling those down.
Yeah, and we do currently in our policy have a category that is for future county government use, and that is for wetland mitigation for future buildings or structures or any county use. So we do have that category already in there, so we can certainly, look at that when I bring you properties next month to categorize.
Cool.
Very good.
Well, that's pretty exciting. That's actually a positive note in all this.
Yeah.
So oh, you're talking about the one downtown Warrenton. I was talking about the land.
No, I was talking about the land.
Okay, so currently that piece of land that started this conversation regarding the fund is currently categorized as other government.
As what?
And the reason for that is because it was, if you'll remember, we talked about this briefly several months ago when this came up, that it abuts the state park, and so they asked us to remove it from the auction. So we've been sitting on that same piece of property for more than 10 years, I think, Serpa. And
Which piece of property are you talking
it's
about?
off of Ridge Road.
No, I mean, is this the one that we started with?
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought that was like on the rolls since the 20s. I mean, that was back, it had been offered for sale for decades. Am I mixing that up with a different property?
I want to say that it was on the roll for a long time, but the first conversation about possibly selling it came up like a decade ago.
More than that, it was
20 years
20
ago, I
years,
think.
okay. That
And
makes
then,
sense.
we even did a timber cruise on it and, at the same time got some information where portions of it are in wetlands. And then Warrenton changed their wetlands maps, and more of it became wetlands on their maps. And in 2007, we were offering it for sale for $500,000, and we had several developers that wanted to buy it and take interest in it, and then the state parks wrote us a letter, please stop the sale of this parcel because we're interested in it, because they said it buffers their entrance and whatever to their park at the Battery Russell entrance, the northern entrance. So we pulled it from there, and then the communication stopped, so we have
So spring forward to Cam being the latest county manager, and the discussion was broached again, and so we went as far to get an appraisal on this property, and the appraisal came in much less than what we thought it was worth because of the new wetlands maps. So there, I mean, the property's still in the same category, save for other government. The state still has done nothing, and now we know that it may not have the same value that we
So sometimes
originally thought.
holding on to the land isn't such a good idea.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I have another question. On point 7 here in the resolution, it's intermittent or seasonal programs to assist the homeless, such as temporary meal sites or seasonal warming centers are not eligible. Is there a reason for that? Or did,
I plagiarized this from Lane County.
I see.
So,
That part out.
so, you know, this is for your board to look at.
Yeah.
Happy to take it out, whatever you,
The ability for us to help the emergency warming center at the church at this time of year, I mean, they're always in a kind of an emergency situation. And so to me, that would be something that I think it
should be deleted.
should be deleted.
Agreed.
Well, and I would ask the commissioners to please take this with you
Yep.
and review it and then send it back to me, and then that way I can bring together like a red line version, or Heather can bring a red line version, and then that way we can continue the discussion and kind of.
But that one, for me, is a non-starter. Good catch on that one, because I mean, with all due respect to our Lane County colleagues, I think the warming centers serve a real need here, and I don't want to preclude funding them.
Yeah, I agree. That's just really just in my this is the first time I've read this, went through this twice here. And
Yeah.
so I think that this is a really good start, and you all did a good job. Job on this. Thank you, Heather, for putting this together for us. So I think we need to do some work on it, and so I guess and one thing Commissioner Thompson mentioned is to get a little more outside. It'd be nice to hear from some of the providers, from Helping Hands and some of the other folks.
Housing agencies, permanent, temporary.
I definitely agree that having the cities participate in this would be maximizing our possibilities.
So would you like for me, no offense, but once the new board is on, schedule something in perhaps February that would include the cities as well as some of the, and just send an invite out to
Yes.
some of the housing agencies and shelters? And
Yeah, I
such?
think that's kind of what your point was, Commissioner Thompson, is you wanted to kind of get more of community input. And I think that's the place to get it from.
And any ideas that comes up from staff that for other funding streams for this would be much appreciated.
Or community members, we have a website, and we can ask people, if we have hot topics, as I recall, and I don't know if we have the capacity to push out messages to all our contacts, but we have a public information officer, and it seems as though this is a topic of great interest to people, and if we want to have community input, if we can affirmatively push out information and ask for feedback, I think that's a good use of our public information officer. I think it's a good use to make more robust our engagement with our constituents all across the county. And if there's some apparatus on the board so people can offer input on our website, just access the homepage and offer input, I'd like to see that. Does that,
Yeah, yeah.
let's make it easy.
I don't know, is that easy?
I'm not the person that has the IT capabilities, so to me it's not easy, but to perhaps to the IT department or to Tom, it might be easy.
You know what, that's why we spent the money to get a new website, was to make this stuff easy. And if it
I'm just
isn't,
saying
no,
from
I'm
the-
not arguing with you at all or criticizing you, no. What I'm saying is, it was sold to us, if we spent this money on the new website, it would be easy to change it. And so if it's not easy, I want to know
Well,
that.
that's not what I was asking. I was asking, is this going to take a lot of time for staff? How is this going to be organized? I mean, I don't think we should just go ahead with this and just,
I think that, that we
So we
will
know
want
this.
to, to a certain extent, limit the topic, because I could see this easily becoming a sounding board
Yes,
that could be very negative.
that would be my
And so-
concern.
So that would be one thing that the person who's trying to decipher through all the information and gather
Yeah.
useful comments versus just people being kind of
Right.
spiteful, would be something.
We want a spite filter, please, on this site. That would be great. Yeah, we're not looking to make things difficult. We are looking to
Yeah.
have constructive
Yeah,
community.
so Suzanne had suggested that perhaps on the website, we could create a link to SurveyMonkey, where we kind of gather the information rather than just people making comments. Then
Sure.
that
You
way.
would have to have specific questions that
Yes.
Yeah.
You
leave
would.
it very specific, and then
Happy for that. Happy for that. Not looking to make life unpleasant or difficult, looking to have structured, positive community input. Absolutely. Thank you for your clarification, Commissioner.
Okay, so we will go back and we will work on some questions to come up with to put a possible link on the homepage, as well as scheduling a meeting in perhaps February to see as many possible constituents or the city's jurisdictions, housing entities that we could get invited.
Good.
Good. Well, I'm pleased moving forward on this. I think this is important. Is there any more?
Yeah, just provide,
Yeah.
email that.
And definitely, the members of the board will, hopefully, will get some.
No, but you did get the part where we said take out the not?
Yes,
And
I
that
scratched that out.
Okay, we're good on that one. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you,
Suzanne?
Suzanne. Thank you, Serpa.
We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.